Welcome back. I have the pleasure now to introduce the next panel discussion on education and disabled people, a tool to end poverty with Dr. Diane Driedger and Dr. Nancy Hansen from the University of Manitoba. Diane, welcome. Nancy, welcome. Over to you both.
Thank you. Nancy has been having trouble getting into the Zoom webinar, and she is still trying. It is kicking her out, and I think she's going to try to phone in to see if that works.
Okay, I will see what we can do on our end in the
For
meantime.
sure,
Thank
for sure. So let's just take a few minutes and we'll see if Nancy can get in. And if she has difficulty, I can talk to the topic and maybe get you all involved in talking about education and disability and how it can be a tool to end poverty. We are rather optimistic, perhaps a tool to combat poverty. So let's just take a few minutes. We'll be back.
Apologize to our viewers for the technical difficulties. We'll get things moving shortly. In the meantime, I'd like to, as we wait for our other panelist that is joining, I'd like to share our report card and just wanted to reflect back that, as you know, we've launched our national report card this year for 2025. Please, viewers, would love you to go on to our website and take a look, have a read through. And if you have any reflections or thoughts, feel free to share your message to us at research@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. In the chat, my colleague here, Omar, has shared the link. We would really appreciate you going on to take a look and see what grade level we have provided this year and hope to work towards a better policy on the Canada Disability Benefit. Thank you so much, and we'll be back in a minute. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's just Omar here from Disability Without Poverty. Diane, I'm not too sure what's going on with Nancy. There's no waiting room. We've been trying to troubleshoot, but they should be able to just enter right away. So I think just for the sakes of keeping the program on schedule, we might have to just kick things off, and then hopefully Nancy will be able to join us. But there is no waiting room, and for some reason I don't see them in the waiting room or anything like that. So I'm not too sure what's been going on. I have to apologize for that.
Yes, well, technology isn't always what we make it out to be, right? We can't
No,
always we can't always depend on it absolutely. And
absolutely. Are they able to call in? Were they able to call in?
I phoned her and asked her if she would call in, and I'm thinking calling in could work.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do is, I mean, we really wanted to talk about this subject because, of course, we find it important. We're educators. We're both professors in the interdisciplinary master's program in disability studies at the University of Manitoba. And we have many years of experience educating students with disabilities and non-disabled students and talking about disability rights and the social model, the medical model, all of these things. And one of the things that we found in our own experience, as well as those of our students, you need to get an education. You need to get post-secondary education. That's the kind of world that we live in. And as I mentioned, our subtitle, that it's a tool to end poverty, may be too optimistic. However, it is a tool that we need to have in our toolbox as people with disabilities. We need to ensure that we can get our irons into the educational fire, as well as other supports that we need. If we don't go to school, we've totally cut ourselves off from that option. And of course, getting post-secondary education means that you have a much better chance of getting a good job, a job that is going to pay to support you and to also support the extra costs of disability that we all have in our lives. So we want to talk a bit about the history of disabled people in education. Both Nancy and I have done a lot of research and writing on the history of people with disabilities, particularly since the Second World War. And basically, disabled people only really began our march towards equality once we got the tools that were offered in post-secondary education. In my research around the history of the disability rights movement, for instance, in Canada, all of the pioneer leaders of our movement went to university in the late 1970s. And they were the first folks to go to our universities, and they were inaccessible. Our leaders in Winnipeg, for instance, where we're from, Henry Enns and Jim Dirksen and Alan Simpson, were all folks who had post-secondary degrees. And they became leaders in a movement at the community level to get folks together all across Canada. And of course, there were other leaders across Canada who also had gotten education, even though it was very inaccessible. For instance, right now I'm writing a biography of Jim Dirksen, one of our pioneers. And he went to University of Winnipeg. And if you've been there, there's lots of stairs, but then no elevators. And so he had a system worked out where he had a wheelchair at one end of the stairway on top and one at the bottom in the place that he lived. And he then would crawl up the stairs from one wheelchair to the next in order to get around campus. Just one example. So our pioneers knew that if we don't know what's going on, we don't have no chance of affecting policy, of affecting social attitudes. We need to have post-secondary education to help us think critically and to help us know what the systems are doing. We may not always agree with our political systems or economic systems or how things are going for people with disabilities. And we all know what the issues are here. We've been talking about them today. But we get tools. We learn the history of social programs. We learn the history of people with disabilities. We learn what solutions have in policy have been talked about throughout history. And now, of course, this conference is continuing in that endeavor. But we have to remember that we need to have tools, and it's very important to get that education. The Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who wrote a book in the 1960s called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Some of you maybe know about it. He was an educator who taught peasants in the Brazilian countryside how to read. And his saying always was, we learn to read the word so that we can read the world. And that's what we're talking about here. We need to be able to read what's going on, to have tools. And of course, as has been talked about, we need community as well. And those same folks who went to university here in Winnipeg in the late 1970s formed the first disabled students organization, say at University of Manitoba. They called it the physically, what was it again? The Physically Disabled Concerns on Campus. And they started our march towards making post-secondary, secondary educations accessible. And of course, we're still on that march here at University of Manitoba. But it was a way for folks to see they were not alone. And we've been hearing about that in the conference today. We are not alone. Us people with disabilities are everywhere. And we can band together in our movements and deliberate about what can we do to effect change. And historically, our disability rights movement through the Council of Canadians with Disabilities and our international arm, Disabled Peoples International, have been very successful. We have disability protected in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Council of Canadians with Disabilities, and particularly Jim Dirksen and Alan Simpson, led the charge. They had to write briefs to parliamentary committees, which are in the historical record. They had to answer questions from politicians about how they thought accessibility would cost too much, and had to then figure out arguments to say, no, it's not going to bankrupt the government. In fact, we're not saying you have to do this overnight. And thus began kind of the policy of accessibility is an evolving thing in society. It's not like we can just make things accessible in one era and then it's accessible forever. And it's always evolving, just as our disabilities are evolving, right? We have new disabilities. We have long COVID. We have new ways of accessibility, new technology. And so all of these things we need to know about. So we got in the charter. And at the international level, people with disabilities from Canada many of our leaders helped in drafting the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And again, folks who were educated, who knew about policy, who had experience with disabled people's groups. Really important. The UN Convention really is the Magna Carta of the disability rights movement. It's what we want, what we all want and aspire to. Some of you folks may say, well, yeah, we want to get an education, but it's very expensive. And how do we have access to that? Some of those supports have been improving quite a bit over the years. You know, there are disability-specific grants through student loans now. There didn't used to be, not when I went to school in the 1970s, not when Nancy Hansen went to school in the 1970s. And also, of course, we have accessibility offices on our campuses. Now, when the original disability pioneers went to university, there was no such thing. Through advocacy, these were established across Canada, the United States, Europe. And so we know that we have some supports there. Students with disabilities know there are supports. However, we also know that they're underfunded and under-resourced. We need more staff. And one of the things that's been happening is that more disabled students are in university than ever these days. And in fact, the accessibility services are really oversubscribed because since COVID, people identifying as having disability at university, students, has gone up almost 100%. So why do we have more students with disabilities? Well, first of all, there are just more of us, right? And I'm sure folks have seen overall the census data from 2022 in Canada, that we make up 27% of the population now. That is 27% of folks self-identify as having a mental or physical disability in the census. And so we have more people with disabilities, and we have more people with disabilities going to university. And I see that Nancy has joined us. Yay! So Nancy, I've been giving my historical talk about the disability rights movement, the importance of education, the statistics on how many folks we are. And I thought, I know you and I were going to talk some too about your experience with your own education as a person with disability, and kind of your view on kind of the period like before the disability leaders started going to university.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay. Well, I am a product of special education, if you will. Up until grade 5, I went to something. I was born and raised in Ontario, so I went to something called the Ottawa Crippled Children's Treatment Center, which was because up until the 1970s, it was largely illegal for disabled people to attend regular school. So where I went to school was in the basement of a regular school, but we never saw any non-disabled kids. There were students of various ages and various disabilities in one classroom. And we did get academics, but the focus was really on occupational and physical therapy. And when I was about 9 years old, my orthopedic surgeon said to my parents, she has to get into regular school. She just has to. So I went through a series of IQ tests, as it were, at the time. And as a matter of fact, the first time I ever saw a disabled person in a position of authority was the psychologist in the wheelchair that gave me the IQ test. And I've often wondered if that put me more at ease when I was doing the IQ test. Anyway, I got paroled at the age of 10. That's the way I referred to going to special school. And so I went to the neighborhood school, but my entire schooling life, I was always kind of looking over my shoulder psychologically, wondering if I'd ever be sent back. And it's important to recognize that I didn't have a negative experience in special school. However, the academics I received were not to the same standard, I think, as a regular school for non-disabled kids. And so I went through the public school system and the high school system. And it was always expected that I would go on to post-secondary education long before it was the cool thing to do. My parents, I was the oldest of three kids. I'm the only one that's disabled. And my parents just always thought that I would go to university. So I did. And strangely enough, it was some, excuse me, let me speak in full sentences, that might help. I experienced more barriers at university than I did elsewhere. And I think it's because people with disabilities weren't expected. I use crutches for mobility. So when you come equipped with hardware, you automatically self-identify whether you want to or not. And so I had to always put my professors at ease so I could do my schooling. I had to deal with, I had great professors too, don't get me wrong. I got some great allies when I was going to school too, but I had to work within a system that never expected me to be there. And I had to sort of deal with creativity at a moment's notice. And I felt that I had to, I was there on approval. So I had to produce all the time. And it was always myself that had to sort of come up with the ideas to improve the situation, or to be able to maneuver in a system that, as I said, never expected me to be there.
Mm-hmm. And that was, you went to university in the 1970s or 1980s?
Well, I went to, well, let's put it this, I've been fortunate enough to go to school, to university in the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, and the 2000s, because I had to work to pay for school all the time, because I wasn't eligible for any grants or things like that, because my parents were in a higher income bracket, right. And my marks were average marks. They weren't bad, but they were average marks. So I was automatically sort of disqualified for any supports and services that might have been available at that time.
Yes. Well, I went to university in the 70s, 80s, and the 2000s. Mm-hmm. And for me, you know, as a person who acquired disability about 35 years ago now, in my early 30s, you know, I had a master's at that point already. I worked in international development with disabled people through the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, and also Disabled People's International. I started out as a non-disabled ally who very much believed in the human rights issues of people with disabilities. became a person who had disability, invisible disabilities. At one point in my career in international development, I realized I can't get on that plane 6 times a year anymore. My energy is sapped, and the jet lag issues and the change of environment, the food, all of these things all the time was really wearing on my body, and I got very sick. And so I had to reevaluate. I decided that more education was the way I was going to go. So I was going to go and do my PhD, and because I felt that I maybe have more control over my time. In many ways, there is more control as a professor. And so I thought, this is the way I can accommodate myself. Now, at the time when I was working too, the idea of working from home like we all did in COVID was not something employers were keen about. And actually, even before I went for my PhD, I was applying for jobs and said, as accommodation, I need to work at home so that I can rest when I need to. And I do a lot of my work lying down on the couch throughout the day. And that, folks, I lost jobs. I was offered jobs and then lost them because I said I need that accommodation. And I'd say that was 20 years ago. And so not too many options. But of course, now we've seen that it works. Working from home works. But we still have problems with ableism. And I really have a lot of trouble with ableism in the university environment, Nancy.
Yes.
We've discovered a new kind of ableism, aversive ableism. Aversive, aversive. There have been studies done that particularly folks in the university environment, we think we're very progressive. But when we tell folks who think they're progressive that they're not accessible to us or they need to improve, they get very offended and upset. They are not ableist. And how could we even say that? So what happens is a switch goes off in the brain. They turn off and don't listen to the fact of what we do need. And so this is happening at all levels in society in Canada, but across the university for sure. And so Nancy and I read these studies and said, oh, wow, folks don't want to be mean to disabled people, but they think they already know because they're already progressive.
And they think they already know what disabled people should be doing. And if I can backtrack just a little bit.
Yeah.
100 million years ago, when I got my first degree in the 1970s, I had my degree in criminology, and I was looking for a job, and the only jobs that were open to disabled people at that time were, I got to work in the mailroom stuffing envelopes at the National Library, because that's what disabled people did in the public service, irrespective of education. So it was at that point where I decided I needed more education to get out of the mailroom.
Right.
Because, and the more, as I progressed with my academics, I was able to get moved through the public service, as it were. And then when I got my PhD, I ended up teaching. This has been the most liberating and the most, shall we say, barrier-ridden experience that I've ever had, employment-wise, because, as Diane said, the academy sees itself as a very elitist place, and understandings of disability are such that we are, and there are air quotes around what I'm saying, we are defective, we are not as productive as we should be. And even though the academy sees itself as progressive, there's a lot of traditional thinking that is just below the surface. And that's what we have to deal with, because a lot of the stuff around the academy at the moment is performative, which means they don't really have to change that much, but they like to think that they're moving in the right direction.
Right, right. If we talk a good talk, then we must be doing the walk.
Yes.
Right? Like A,
yeah.
therefore B. But the thing is, we're really invisible, actually, as people with disabilities in the academy, aren't we, Nancy?
Yes, we are.
People don't listen to us. We can talk until we're blue in the face.
Yeah, no, we are reactionary. We are disruptive to the traditional way of doing things. And even though nobody's ever gotten angry, they just choose not to listen to us anymore.
Yes. And so, folks, we've just told a tale of woe there, but we still need to get into post-secondary education so that we have a chance.
Yeah.
If we don't educate ourselves, we don't even have a chance of lifting ourselves out of poverty.
That's it.
You know, it's something that we can do under our own steam to move ourselves forward.
And the academy is changing because we're there. And don't get me wrong, I love my job. Even though there's I love my job. We're making change where we can, both inside and outside the university. And we couldn't do that without the education that we have now.
Exactly. And of course, this many students that we've taught over the 23 years of our program are folks who are now out in the community who mostly have jobs, or they've gone on to do their own PhDs, and now they're teaching disability studies. So the influence is there, and even us showing up, folks showing up on campuses. Remember, back to the late 70s, disabled people who were then mostly wheelchair users showed up, and then they had to be dealt with, in air quotes. Something had to be done. And when, unfortunately, they're still dealing with us, but you know, it holds great promise for us as people with disabilities. We know, so that we know what's going on. We have tools to take care of our own selves and our community. And I would encourage folks to read the latest journal, Canadian Journal of Disability Studies. The latest issue is on undergraduate education, and it's edited by Danielle E. Lawrence, Paul D.C. Bones, and Emily King. Really good articles from students with disabilities and faculty. And I just like to end with a quote from their introduction. Education continues to hold the promise of hope for a better understanding, for economic prosperity, and most of all, for more inclusive educational practices for all students and academic faculty and staff. Thanks, folks. If you have questions, I think folks need to put it in the chat, right?
We do actually. Hello, everyone, and our viewers. Thank you for staying tuned, and welcome, Nancy. It's great to have you. Thank you so much. I have questions for you both, and if they're not posed to anyone particularly, I will just share, and then whoever wants to jump in, feel free. First question is, what supports are most critical to ensure disabled students are not only accessing higher education, but succeeding in it? Some thoughts?
Oh boy, could I speak first to that?
Sure, and then I'll hop in after.
I'm sure we have lists, so I won't get them all. For me, the major thing is, and I felt this as a student with disability as well, the idea that we are welcome. Are we welcome in a classroom? Do professors make us feel welcome? Do other students make us feel welcome? And educators can provide that atmosphere. You can run your class so that everyone will feel welcome. So we need to think a lot about the affect, AFFECT, that is the emotional lives of students with disabilities. And my PhD is in education, so I'm always thinking about, are folks going to learn? And the best way to learn is if you feel welcome. Nancy?
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And also find allies where you can. I had some really great profs who just got it, and I didn't have to go and explain anything to anybody. If I can give a shout out to somebody who's dear and no longer with us, the Honorable Monique Bégin was one of the best profs I ever had in university, because she always, made things as open and accessible as possible, and it was just done. I didn't even have to ask for anything. It was just done. Also, if I can give a shout out to the National Educational Association of Disabled Students, they are fantastic, and they have a lot of resources there. Although I didn't use them myself, I know that the student accommodation services on campuses across Canada are doing the best they can with the few resources that they have.
Yes. And of course, students with disabilities are forming their own groups on campus.
Exactly.
And this is always an option. And one of the things is that students, of course, go through the program and graduate, and so people leave the group. So then we have times, say at U of M, where there is no student with disabilities group, but maybe there'll be folks next year who want to form one. So these groups are kind of coming in and out all the time. Yep. But it's an important tool of peer support. Yeah. And also ways of representing disability issues to the student councils and, of course, to the administration.
It's interesting today, the International Day of Disabled Persons, that the institution we work for hasn't seemed to recognize it in any way.
Not at all.
Just saying. You can draw your own conclusions.
Appreciate that, Dr. Hansen. Dr. Driedger and Dr. Hansen, I just realized we are out of time. There are two other questions. Well, I'll definitely send those over. Our team will send them over to you. There was some final reflection, but we will get that from you next time. On behalf of Disability Without Poverty, thank you, heartfelt thank you for your conversation. It was very enlightening and engaging for our viewers here today. Viewers, we are now going to take 10 minutes, short little break. Stay tuned, and we will be back again. Thank you so much, panelists. We'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.